Start?
Sure, go ahead.
Well, we'll start like we did earlier today. Thank you so much for those of you who joined us all day. I'm Mike and this is Chris, and we're golf course architects. And I had said earlier today, just like the government, we're here to help you with your golf course. And so that's really the intent of this meeting, and all day today actually. And to tell you what happened, if you weren't here earlier, we had a town hall meeting like this and a very nice lunch. And then we went out and spent time on the golf course and walked probably at least half the golf holes where there were questions and answered those questions, I believe. And now we're back here. And so we'd like to kind of answer other questions that may have arisen through the day, or if there are parts that some of you would like for us to reiterate. I don't want to bore those people who were kind enough to be here all day with superfluous stuff, but I'd certainly talk about whatever we want to talk about, whether it's philosophy of bunkers and irrigation and why we're changing what we're changing. I mean, what would you like to hear, I guess, is our town hall meeting. Fireside chat without the fire. Any suggestions?
Well, let's start with, if there are no suggestions, let's
Okay, there
start
we
with
go.
sand bunkers.
All right, sand bunkers.
What are your candid thoughts on sand bunkers? Because if you look at the plan, the vast majority of the plan has a lot of little black lines through sand bunkers.
Yes.
So,
And
thoughts.
let's back up one more thing from that.
All right.
What's driving this whole process is the irrigation system. Your irrigation system is really exceeded its life expectancy. You're running on bald tires in the snow right now. And Jason, bless his heart, and his crew have been able to keep it going. But at some point, just all the repairs that have to go on. And the design of that system, by the way, is such that if something breaks in the line, then the valve goes on. It doesn't close. It's called normally open. And it was a system that Toro used about 35 years ago that lasted about 5 years until somebody said, well, this is a stupid idea. You know, when a little line breaks, then, the head goes on. So something could break in the middle of the night, and then you could have irrigation heads go on instead of normally closed, which means that if something breaks, it doesn't go on. And so that's one of the issues. The other issue is the sprinkler heads are on a block system. So if we want to water a little portion over here, the only way we can do it with a hose. You can't use a sprinkler because when you turn the valve on, that sprinkler, that sprinkler, that sprinkler, and that sprinkler are going to turn on. And so now Jason is working with, a sledgehammer when he's trying to drive a tack. And so the irrigation system is an old design. It's gone beyond its usage. It's your lifeblood. If you don't have irrigation in the middle of the summer, your chances of having a golf course that you want to play are much diminished. So we're going to replace the irrigation system. That's a given. Nobody's arguing about that. So the logic is, if we're going to change that, let's do the other things, change the other things that the irrigation system would impact if we changed them later. For instance, if we're going to move a bunker, let's not put in an irrigation line and then put a bunker somewhere near that and then have to change the irrigation again. So let's do a coordinated plan. So Chris and I are part of a team that includes the golf course design side of it. There is a irrigation designer who is part of this team. There's an arborist who's part of our team. There is a drainage specialist, the golf course drainage specialist is part of the team. And then we have there's probably some people that I'm missing here, but it isn't just us making all these decisions. There's a whole group of pretty smart people that are looking at your golf course and say, what's the right way to go forward with that? So now we're to bunkers, finally. Earlier we said, and that hasn't changed, there are 5 purposes for bunkers. Most people think of bunkers as being a hazard, a penal area, where if the ball goes in there, then it should extract should make the next golf shot harder. You can't ground your club, the footing is uneven. For a good player anymore, that doesn't matter. They can get up and down out of bunkers. They practice, the wedges are designed right, the sand is perfect. So a bunker is not really that much of a hazard for a really, really good player. But for the average player, it is a real hazard. I mean, it's, you don't get out in up and down, you're lucky to get out in one kind of a thing. And then the second thing about that is it disturbs the playability. There's a financial aspect of it. And to rebuild bunkers, which you need to rebuild bunkers because every time you get a huge rainstorm, the bunkers wash out. And that isn't Jason's fault. You know, it's really the fault of the fact of the way the bunkers were originally designed. And when those bunkers wash out, then the sand goes to the bottom, the dirt erodes off the edges. During the winter, you get freezing and thawing and more dirt comes in. The sand gets contaminated, the drainage slows down, and then that just causes even more problems. And so the bunkers need to be rebuilt, even though they were done 12 or 15 years ago. And so the question is, how much? To rebuild a 1 square foot area of bunker is about 10 or 11 bucks. And that's based on recent bid analysis. That's recent cost estimate that Jason has gotten. So if all of a sudden you have 100,000 square feet of bunkers at $1 a square foot, you're talking $1 million to rebuild the bunkers. And that's not an astronomical number at all. And I think we gave the number earlier that St. George's spent 1.7 million. There was another Toronto club that I know was at 1.3, 1.4 million to rebuild bunkers. And they're supposed to be hazards. But we're spending more money per square foot to maintain bunkers on golf courses than we are any other part of the golf courses. We don't spend nearly that amount on greens compared to what we do on bunkers. And especially poorly designed bunkers like we have here. The second thing about it is the access in and out of these bunkers. Most of them are too high or too deep. They're difficult to get in and out of, both for maintenance and for golfers. They have a great visual value, except that a lot of them are hidden because they're down in the ground and they have a high front to them. So what we're suggesting is, when we think in terms of bunkers, we can rebuild bunkers so that they're more visible, more maintainable, more playable, and still exact the same amount of hazard. And that's really what our intent is trying to do. So going back, a bunker can be a penal hazard, it can be a directional bunker, it can be a bunker that is a safety divider between two holes, it can be a retaining bunker that keeps the ball from rolling down the hill or out of bounds or someplace, or you can put it in just because it looks very good. And so all of those are legitimate uses. When we go to a bunker, we ask, why is this bunker here? What function does it serve? Is it a penal bunker, a safety bunker, a retaining bunker, a directional bunker, or an aesthetic bunker? And then is it the right form and function? Does it work the way it's supposed to? And so that's what a bunker study does. And that's what we've done. And so in most instances, most of your bunkers are going to get smaller. And we're trying to keep the parts that are the most important to challenge the good player without aggravating an average player needlessly. And just make the round of golf more fun and fast and competitive and all of those things. So that's a lead-in. I missed that. I couldn't.
No, that was the whole kit and caboodle. I think everybody can leave now. That was a dissertation subject.
Yeah.
So whoa, this is great. Morning session didn't have many questions. If we could start, just for me, I'm going to go clockwise. Yes, sir.
Jason mentioned on the tour about the arborist is going to do a study.
Yes.
About how the shade affects the greens different times of the year. How long, when will that be forthcoming? How long will it take to do?
Okay, that's a great question. So there are companies that you may have heard in the past, the United States Golf Course Association and ArborCom. There are many firms in the United States that do this type of work. So we have a superb arborist here who works for the Hunt Club and has done many shade study assessments in Toronto for the National Golf Club, Mississauga, St. George's. So he's well regarded. He's worked with many municipalities. And so he will be arriving here early November to mid-November once the leaves have come off these trees and do assessments. You may have noticed when you walk the property there are tags. So currently we have an inventory of all the trees on the golf course, their age, their class, their current health assessment, things of that sort, etc. So he will tally those and put it into a computer model and then focus spring, summer, fall, and winter shade on these surfaces. And then he'll take that, overlay it on the map that we have currently, and provide that information to Mike. So the turnaround on that might be 4 weeks to 8. I imagine in the new year, there'll be some information that's presented to Mike, and then they'll be going through that.
Just follow up, is that for greens and tees, or?
Primarily, that'll be for the primary growing environment that we're really concerned on are your golf greens. So primarily greens. He could do it for everywhere else, but for now, it's just the corridors around the greens.
The shorter the grass, the greater the need for not only light, but the quality of light. And so that's why the focus is on the golf greens. The longer the grass, the poorer, and vice versa. So, and the airflow, again, from a pathological standpoint. Beautiful thing about this study is that it takes away the supposition. Normally, you have a group that comes out and says, you look at a tree and they go, I don't think they get any shade here, which may or may not be accurate because it's just hearsay. This way, there's actually verifiable data that's not biased by Hurdzan or Griffiths or anyone else with a conflict of interest that says, this is what the data shows, and then that can be correlated to the results as far as turf health or potential turf health in a situation where something could be moved either to improve the health or slightly adjust it so that at least it's good enough but not necessarily optimal. So there's the shades of gray within that. That answer the question?
In other words, we can
Okay, very
remove
good.
some limbs sometimes, and that'll improve things, or limb up a tree.
It's not an all or nothing, as
Right.
you know. The golf course is a golf course. The golf course is not an arboretum. However, there's no one that necessarily loves trees more than us, but trees need to be in the right places. A tree in the wrong place is a weed in the sky. Now, that sounds terrible to say, but nonetheless, again, we've got to maintain a core focus on making sure that the playability and the agronomics of the golf course is sound, and then it's complemented, of course, with one of the most important assets, which are the trees. Fair enough? Yes, sir.
I was going to ask you, thank you for that introduction, very interesting. We spent a lot of money on our greens in the past. And,
Yes, you
and
have.
maintained them. And now for you to come along and say our greens need to be replaced, I guess how do we base that assumption on?
That's a really good question. And again, just as Chris said, we don't work on supposition, we work on data. And so all of these greens have been mapped. And they've been mapped down to 1/10 of a foot contour lines. And then we use the computers to look at slopes within those greens. And so we can develop slope maps that basically look like a colored weather map is what they look like. John has a whole set of those, and Jason, that you can look at if you're very interested in them. But the reason we do that is that a green has to have at least a certain amount of slope and drainage. And that magic number is 1.5%. And then the magic number at the high end of where you set hole locations is 2.5. So we are mapped so closely, and these greens charts show that. The problem with the greens at London Hunt are not too much slope. There, in some instances, it's too little slope. And so these greens are so flat that what happens is when the ground is frozen down below in the spring, and you get melt on top, and then you get water, and then it freezes at night, now you've got ice that is formed on top of that, or you get melting snow. And the POA can last about 15 to 18 days with ice on it, and then it's going to die. So just before Jason came, you went through that where you lost a lot of greens in the winter. And actually last winter, even in Toronto, they lost a lot of greens. It wasn't the bent grass that died, it was the POA that died, and it died because of the ice. And so when we talk about changing greens, we're trying to make these greens drain better, surface drain. And so that's why, as when we did the tour today, I talked about, look, we're going to lose some greens here, but we have to do it in order to create drainage in order to do that. So we're talking, losing 5 or 8 or 10% of the green space, but to improve that drainage. So we're not rebuilding, you don't have to rebuild them. And regrassing, we can improve these greens, but the regrassing is you still have POA and you still have bent. The POA likes the wet, the bent likes the dry. He's got to keep it all green. So now he's got to figure out wet and dry, how do I find that balance? So he's gonna favor the weakest plant, which is the POA. And so now you go into winter with more POA than you started with, because that's what you've been favoring all summer in the heat of. So that's, the regrassing is a whole nother topic that has to do with trying to get all bent grass, or mostly bent grass, instead of POA. But in general, we're not really talking about rebuilding these screens, trying to get drainage in them right now. The regrassing is a whole nother discussion you need to have at some time, but I don't know if this is the right time. Jay, you want to add anything, Jason? I don't know. That we answered.
That's a great question. In regards to rebuilding and regrassing these greens, Mike, in essence, hit the nail on the head. Everything about the health of this golf course is from below. We never see anything that's like the irrigation system. You never see it. It's below. The drainage is below. Your success is the roots are below. You never see all the work is underneath. So for these greens to shrink the footprint from a 10,000 square foot green to a 9,000 square foot green, the inherent surfaces will stay the same. It's just the outside 2 feet, 3 feet, 1 feet, 4 feet. That's all that will be lost and reshifted, so to speak. The conversation about regrassing is something that could happen in 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, or never. But certainly the reliability of these greens will be enhanced threefold just by shrinking them just a tickle to get that water to move.
We've had to replace the sand in the past, in the greens.
And maybe someone else might be able to answer that question before my time, but you know, these greens are original, other than a few greens that had additions. So they're 1960 construction, modified USGA, considerable amount of top dressing and other things we've done to these greens. But as far as coring them out and starting them fresh, I know number 12 green, and there were some additions to number 3 and number 17, for example. Someone else might know if they've actually been all rebuilt. I don't believe they have all been rebuilt. You've lost a few greens historically from weather. 2014, we lost 98.5%. 99% of the greens died for ice cover. And that was the year we had the Canadian Open here. So that was traumatic, and that was exactly because of water. Yeah.
Jason?
Yes, sir.
You're saying by changing the peripheral 1 to 2 feet on a green will be enough to change the drainage pattern to make them more viable?
Correct. So it's called a collar dam. In some instances, it may be 6 feet, it may be 10 feet. But in general, if you take less than a flagstick width from the edge out is where everything's built up. So a lot of our bunkers, for example, number 9, if you see how we prepare this golf course for the winter, in 2 weeks' time, we will take a sod cutter and literally remove 36 channels on the greens, 2 to 3 on every green, exit points. The collars have built up over time from sand top dressing. They've elevated themselves 2 to 3 inches. That's all, you don't need much more than 0 to keep water from being flat. The water will back up. Now, if it's shaded for the back of 18 green, there's some Austrian pines, there's a bunker, and there's a dip. That snow will sit there all winter. It won't go uphill, it won't go through. So we literally cut an opening. We put drains in these greens 4 feet down in the winter to minimize water. So to your question, yes, if you look at the maps that Mike referenced, most of it's 3 feet out. 3 feet out is where the water needs to shed out and down into the bunker. Our bunkers are elevated like wings, and everything's up. So we have a saucer. We need to do the upside. Like Donald Ross was wonderful. He was ahead of his time. He did this. That's why those greens are so much fun to play and they're great to look after. I would much rather hand water a green in the summer than to have a green like this that dies every winter.
Jason, so this summer the general commentary has been that the greens, probably from start to finish of the season, have been likely the most consistent. How would you compare this year to 3 years ago? And what do you think the difference has been, or has it just been truly weather?
It's a challenge. It's like we have 18 children. Each one has their own personality. You know, and it took me 4 years to figure them out.
Yeah.
You know, and when I came to Hunt Club, it's like a battleship. And you want to move a battleship with a small engine, it takes a long time. It doesn't move quick. So inputs. So number 1, we did a report card on every single green. Every green has a report card, a grade from A to F. We average a C. So we did a report card on sunlight, a report card on surface drainage, a report card on internal drainage, report card on traffic in and traffic out, pinnable locations, all these factors, POA versus bent grass. So we knew where we started. What I would say is number one was sunlight. If we can think of 14 green, that green had Austrian pines and crab apples all the way around the right side. It never saw a lick of sunlight until 1 o'clock in the afternoon. That green sees sun from the morning till 1 o'clock in the afternoon, so it's tremendously healthy. Biggest thing I would say is drainage. So we've invested, as membership, you've invested so much resources on sand. So, you know, surface organic matter, we've done the grading. We do deep tining, dry jack, drill and fill, which we're doing again tomorrow. Drill and fill really took us over the hump last year, you know, to get that water to move through. But these greens have marginal internal drainage in the summer. There are pipes in these greens. But that's the big one, is to get rid of the water. As far as our management practices, you keep tweaking things. About fertility, you know, you see us measuring grass every day, so we know how much we're harvesting. It's hard to say. Weather is a factor, and our inputs are a factor, but it's like a workout program. You know, it's long term, and we're finally seeing the dividends. And we'll pray that we have a good winter, and we'll be able to turn that dial up again next year. But
So here's the factor, is the Jason factor. You are so fortunate, and I'm not getting paid any more or less, he didn't say anything, I don't need to say it, but you are so damn lucky to have this guy as your superintendent, to be very, very honest. You ever been in a position where, like in high school, you did group work, and you'd have one person who worked really hard, and the rest of them didn't give a shit, and the group got an A on the group work project, and you thought, well, geez, that's a really good group. No, it's because one person propped the rest of the group up. That's the guy that's propping it up. So unfortunately, you're in a position where it's kind of like medical doctors. If you graduate at the top and bottom of the class, you're still called a medical doctor, right? Same with golf course architects. I got to be careful here. Some golf architects are more interested in the visuals and not as interested in the functionality or the agronomics. That's for someone else. Unfortunately, part of being a complete design considers everything as a single unit and figuring out in shrewd ways to have your cake and eat it too, to have the drainage and the pin positions, to have the challenging hole locations, to have, and so two things are happening. One is the Jason effect, and number two, we're in a little bit different position with an architect that understands form and function, and you're going to reap the benefits of that. Hopefully that, he's bashful and wouldn't say it, but I will. Yes, Glenn's been waiting very patiently. Thank
no,
you.
it's all right. Chris, you know, one of the things with planning is we want to make sure we're planning for the future, not for the past, obviously. And two of the things that strike me that we need to be conscious of going forward. One is that increasingly we're going to have water restrictions on how much water we can take out of the river. We've been extraordinarily fortunate so far. Lucky would be a better word,
Yep.
but we're going to be restricted on water. And it's going to get a lot more expensive.
Yep.
So I think any redesign we do, hopefully we'll take that into consideration. The other thing, and I think Jason would agree, I mean, our summer storms are getting more violent every summer. And whenever we have these violent storms, which seems to be more frequent, they wash out, some of the bigger traps get washed out and they get washed down, as you talked about earlier. So hopefully in the redesign, we're taking that into consideration. That's a big cost.
Those are two really, really, really good points. And water is going to become an enormous political, social issue. And just when we drive in, we see the tremendous expansion of all of the housing and all of the commercial development. All of that needs water. And so when it looks to find somebody that doesn't need water, well, those guys at the country club, they don't need that water. You know, and so we see a lot of places like in Florida a few years ago where they were down to 20% of their water allocation. If they needed 1 million, they got 200,000. And you guys figured out. So they were doing what they could just to water the grains to keep them alive. I don't know that it'll ever get that bad, but it could. But you're taking your water out of the Thames. And when that is going to be government controlled, one of the bigger plans that we had, well, one of the things we talked about on 14, if you look at our improvement study, is there's a pond that was going to go on the right side of 14 in that low area where the big oak tree is. And then on the left side of the fairway, in the big valley that goes down towards 10, there was going to be a water reservoir plan. So if you look at the master plan, you'll see those two areas. We believe there's enough underground water here, enough subsurface water that if somebody does a good well study and we capture the surface water, that you can become much more independent from the river. And so that's part of it. The second issue is not only to have your own water supply, and talking about making number 4 pond larger, cleaning out these ponds so they have more capacity, so that you can have your own water when you need it to get by that rough 4 to 6 weeks. The second thing is these new irrigation systems are so much better at conserving water. I talked about when he wants to turn on 1 sprinkler, he has to turn on 4. With a new irrigation system, you can turn on 1 sprinkler at a time, but more importantly, the computer would say, or you have to program it, but you can make it do it. If it needs 12 minutes of water, but it only can take 6 minutes of water, the computer would say, okay, we're going to give it 3 minutes here, and then we're going to wait a half an hour, give it another 3 minutes of water, wait another half an hour, give it another 3, and so you don't waste any water. The water control is so much better by having this new irrigation system that you really save a lot of water through that. And then lastly, on the point about, God, I forgot what your last
Let
point
me take the sand bunkers.
There you go.
The sand bunkers are, they seem so simple. It is a hole in the ground, and you put sand, you put drainage. How hard can this be? And it's not brain surgery, but it's like anything in life. There's a proper way to do things. And if you're not doing it the proper way, things can go awry. So I use the example, a sand bunker is a lot like an engine in a car. There's a lot of pieces and parts in that engine, and they all need to work together because you can't just take one part out, the whole damn thing shuts off. So a sand bunker has to have each and every component within it working together as a single unit. So the sand has to be selected to work with the liner, and the liner has to be selected to work with the drainage, and the configuration of the bottom of the bunker needs to be such a way that the drainage ends up at the drainage ditch, and then you need to have a certain edging component to the bunker and the way the grass would. There's so many components that if you miss one of those, the entire system fails. And again, it's not, we could spend an hour to talk about sand bunkers explicitly. Again, none of it's difficult once it's explained, but that's why you see so many courses spend a lot of money over and over. Now, sand bunkers do wear out. There's an 8 to 10 year life expectancy. Everything on a golf course has a life cycle. It's a living entity. Everything's dynamic. But that aside, with this catastrophic washouts, typically there's 1 or 2 things that weren't matched up properly, and when that happens, the entire system, it's like playing Jenga, you pull the little blocks out and the whole damn thing, and you go, it's just one block, yes, but it all has to work together. That's a side conversation for anyone who's interested to have it, to point those out, but that's an important point to note.
And in order to make sure we know that those pieces work together, Jason has built 1 test bunker this fall that he finished 2 days ago or 3 days ago. Maybe you're not finished.
It's been a work hard. It's a combination of my skill set.
And then we're going to do.
The sand did it next Wednesday.
Next Wednesday. Okay. So if you're interested, I know Jason would be happy to give you a tour of this test bunker that we're making to try to figure out what the right bottom, the right drainage, how labor intensive, is the cost right, is the sand right. We've got 2 different kinds of sands coming. We're going to try 3 different kinds of liners, right? The cap.
This fall, it's just the one time.
Just the one capillary concrete.
Correct, but there are other mediums next spring.
Yeah, but when we get the other one done, we'll try a couple different things, trying to find that right solution, that right prescription to make, so that at the long run, that you can get 10 or 12 years out of bunkers. But typically, as Chris said, 8 to 10 is really the market.
The most important point is you get rid of the damn textbooks about what should work in the real world, and you get out to what actually does work on your specific site. And so we're taking the institutional knowledge that we have, combining it with him, combining it with the products that are available at the price point that we're looking at, and have him run through a couple hybrid iterations on your project to observe, okay, your pieces line up and you get an A on your piece of paper, but does it actually work in the real world? theoretical. And that's the difference between what a lot of clubs do, is they stop at the theoretical side and they don't go into the actual practice side, to include how does the bunker play, because ultimately that's going to be a major concern. If the sand's so damn hard you can't take a divot, you're not going to be very happy, no matter what Hurdzan says how good it is or isn't. And so again, all those components have to come in together. Glenn, does that answer both of those questions ad nauseum?
And our goal is a half-inch of fluff over a nice, solid, well-drained base, and to try to extend that as much through the playing day as we can. Part of the problem is when you have south and west-facing bunkers, they dry out more than north-facing bunkers. And so it's hard to have an 18-hole golf course with golf holes playing in all different directions, bunkers facing in all different directions, and build them all the same and have them stay the same.
They actually have bunker irrigation.
Yeah.
It will irrigate the bunker separately depending upon the aspect of the bunker. Just gets into the weeds really quick.
It gets kind of crazy.
But the point is that it's more than a hole in the ground with sand in it, and you got to have somebody that, again, as a team to put it all together. Other questions?
You know, I noticed Chris is a lot like Bernie Sanders, isn't he? But you notice
There you go. Yes, sir.
In case people don't know your
Thank you.
background, I wondered if you could maybe talk
Definitely
about one or
not.
two high-profile courses you worked on in the States, what the challenges were, and kind of what the end results were.
2 high-profile courses worked on the states, challenges, and then results.
And Chris, just as a follow-up, you might talk about other courses you've done
Sure.
as candidate, just the conversation.
Oh, okay, thank you, yes, perfect. Go ahead, so why don't you take the states?
the state, probably 2 high-profile courses. Well, Scioto Country Club is a top 50, I think, in the United States of 17,000.
You ever heard of Aaron Hills?
Yeah.
Held a US Open, that's high profile.
That's high, yeah.
You want to talk about that one?
Yeah. And what was the specific about that?
Just what were the challenges?
Oh, the challenges.
Yeah.
Well, you know, it's the same challenges. The exact same challenges as we're doing here is to try to make the golf course playable for average players, but yet have the golf course flexible enough that you can make it challenge the very best players in the game. And we do that with tee placement and bunker placement and depth and all of the things. So Aaron Hills and it's the exact same challenges. You know, tees, landing areas, hazards, and hole locations within greens to set up the shot values. Probably the other one again, I mentioned Scioto earlier. Scioto is a top 50 in the U.S. It held the USGA Senior Open in 2016. It's a members golf course. We rebuilt tees, greens, bunkers,
Talk about
fairways.
Calusa.
Huh?
Talk about Calusa.
Calusa
Original
Pines.
designs, talk
Yeah,
about
original
Calusa.
design. Calusa Pines down in
It's a top
Naples,
30 in
Florida.
the United States, perennial.
And Calusa was one of those, how do you build a golf course in South Florida that's unique to every other golf course in Florida? And if you've ever played that golf course or going down there, it is the most unique golf course in Florida, even though it was in flat swamp when we started. And it's because of the elevation changes we made, how we used the fill material, how we were able to get some visual changes in grade where there really wasn't a lot, and just some new techniques.
60 to 80 feet of elevation changes in Florida, and it was on a scale that was so massive it was convincing, so it didn't look contrived.
Yeah.
And so the challenges, like my father had mentioned, each golf course, new courses are a lot easier to design than existing courses because of the group in the room. No matter what solution, and this is obviously a cross-section, no matter what solutions we come up with, there are going to be some people that are not happy with them. So you come up with an optimal, and that's always the challenge, is finding where are the pressure points, where are the artistic points, where are the functional points, and trying to blend all those together. And it never really has, it doesn't necessarily matter what the client wants to do in terms of, do they want to host a major championship? Do they want a course to brag to their friends about? Do they want a family-friendly, lower income course that people can play quickly and have fun? It's always the same, just like what we're talking about here, but sometimes they're greater than others in terms of what the focus is. In this case, it just happens to be bunkers. Does that answer the question on at least the United States component? Okay, and so how did we come into Canada's treated Hurdzan extraordinarily well. Canada is what took Hurdzan from who, which you still may say who, at least people know who Nicholas is, but from who to, oh yeah, I've heard of him, he does some good stuff. And the course that did that was Devil's Pulpit Paintbrush, which most of the group have heard of. That's for Trivial Pursuit founders Chris Haney and Scott Abbott. That was the break in the late 80s that took who is this Hurdzan guy and gave him a budget and gave him a site and gave him an owner that said, hey, show me what you can do. You're a smart dude. You never had this opportunity. This is your big break. Don't screw it up. And it still continues to give. It's a hell of a course, particularly the paintbrush. Since then, we've done courses such as Georgian Bay, Lady Ob, which is a Mont Blanc. We've done Dunderave. We've done
Royal Woodbine.
well, I don't think anyone care about Royal Woodbine per se.
Pretty good golf course.
With relative to those. Bondhead, we have a mixing of generations. Bondhead, north and south. Yeah, I'm the pompous asshole young kid, and he paid the dues, so yeah, you know how that goes. We'll talk about that. But the point is that with the addition of Ottawa Hunt and Golf Club, which really was a course that was not even top 100, was it?
No.
Before Hurdzan started, and you take it, you turn it into something that hosts the CPU Women's Open 2 or 3 years later, directly attributable to his efforts, the efforts of Eric Ruse and all. That's the type of who and what we are from a Canadian perspective. Obviously, the most recent and most exciting for us is London Hunt and what we can potentially do here. So that's our track record, and I appreciate you, Glenn, bringing up the Canadian component because, frankly, we love our Canadian friends, and they are the ones that gave us the opportunity to do a lot of really cool stuff in the States. As well. That was our credibility.
I know Lauren Rubenstein once said that
That's right.
we have more ranked golf courses than any other American.
That is true. Actually, I believe that's true.
Yeah.
That Hurdzan has more top and score golf. And most everybody knows who Lauren Rubenstein is, I would assume, is a fairly well known. Like him or hate him, one way or another. Thank you for that.
Other questions? Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Well, we started on a line where we talked about the bunkers, and we talked about tees a little bit while we were out there. We're trying to give the golf course as much flexibility as we can, and that is that we believe that you need some more forward tees in places, and we also see opportunities to add some back tees. And the question came up a little bit earlier is, why do we need back tees? There's a lot of reasons. First of all, you got a lot of young people that you're trying to attract into your club, and they tend to hit the ball a lot further than the old people that you tend to bring into your club. And anymore, a golf course has got to be able to test that. And so trying to get a golf course that is 7,400 yards is not unreasonable at all. Matter of fact, Chris mentioned the CP LPGA Open, and because of our work at Ottawa Hunt, we've become pretty good friends with the Henderson family. And Brooke is hitting the ball, in that 260, 270, 280 range fairly. And I guarantee you there's a whole bunch of other young people that want golf courses. So if we can get some back tees, we can keep the slope rating where we want it or take it up a little bit from there. But we need those forward tees so that people like me that are getting to be old guys and crotchety and that I can play the golf course. And I mentioned earlier this morning that Chris and I every Friday afternoon play golf with my mom, who's 96. She plays 4 or 5 days a week. And so, golf with grandma is our Friday afternoon deal. And so we know how she's 90s, it keeps her young. She is social, she has social activity, she has friends, she gets the exercise, she's outside, she has something to look forward to. All of those things, and my mom couldn't play a lot of your golf holes, and so that's kind of the yardstick that I use. Can people that are 95, 98, 100 years old still play this golf course and enjoy it? And so that's why we're suggesting forward tees in some places. And playable corridors like 10. 10 is one of those things on paper, most people look at and go, I don't understand why they're doing that. You're making the hole too easy. But when we go out and explain what we're going to do with 10, I think most everybody that was on the walkthrough this afternoon said, makes perfect sense to me, now I understand. And that hole will not be easier for the good player, but it'll certainly be easier for somebody that's a 20 or 30 or 35 handicap.
Yes, sir.
Like, in the walk around today, I read all the literature to this point. Did the walk around today, did it shed new light on what's going on as far as how you would see the ideal renovation here? Can you give like a 3-minute, how are the trees gonna look, how are the bunkers gonna look? Are there any deletions, additions, contour changes to fairways, additions of what? Just a quick little 5-minute synopsis.
Does somebody that was on the walk around want to answer that question? I mean, that's who ought to answer that question. People who were on the walk around that said, "Oh yeah, now I understand."
No, it's actually for a summary.
That's what I mean. That was the easy way. But summarize it basically. I don't think anything has changed from the plan. I think that we looked at what was on the paper. We explained what we wanted to do on the ground, and I don't think, if anything, the comments I heard is, you remember you were going to do that, now you're not. Why are you not doing that? And I said, well, because the last meeting someone told us we weren't going to do that. Well, no, I think we ought to put that back in. So it's going to be that ebb and flow. But nothing that's on this piece of paper, which is version 4, is changed from what based on the walk around. If anything, I think there's a lot more support for it, just because all of a sudden now they understand it. I mean, we're used to dealing with maps all the time, but people that aren't just can't quite grasp it.
Which is everybody.
Understandable. Yeah.
Doesn't mean anything's a piece of paper.
No,
So
just-
that's why I always encourage, the beautiful thing about those is that the only way, unless we give you a picture, the only way that it makes any damn sense is to actually be out there and to hopefully have the opportunity to have that narrative component, because otherwise it's two-dimensional drawings.
For the higher handicap people who are going to have an easier golf course, has it been the experience that their handicaps have actually come down?
No.
Do you know that?
Not really. They have more fun. They play more golf. I don't think that anybody's handicap is materially coming down. But the difference would be on number 10 as an example. Take number 2 as an example. A lot of the higher handicaps just have trouble getting it over the water. So, it's a frustration on the second hole that doesn't need to be, because there's no place to play it except, and that's all we're trying to do is give them a bailout area. But I don't think there's been any study done or marked study that anybody's handicap has ever come down.
Statistically, yes, but from a practical standpoint, if you're a 28 handicap and now you're a 25, you're not playing in the club championship, but you are having more fun. And that's what's important, because there are infinitely more people with that 25.
That's what I was getting at.
Exactly.
If you went from 28 to 25,
Yes.
you're going to like the game more that year.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and our greatest compliments are from the higher handicapper. Why? Because they say, this is a hell of a lot more fair, reasonable, fun, enjoyable, increased pace of play golf course, which sounds like we're taking something away. It sounds like this is a zero-sum game, and it's not. Because then on the flip side, then your A players, your scratch players say, you're playing a golf course too easy. We're not doing anything to affect the scratch players per se in that particular discussion. And here's a good example. If you've got a bunker that's, let's say a scratch player hits the ball 280 yards off the tee. If you have a bunker that's 40 yards out, does the scratch player give a damn whether the bunker is 10,000 square feet, 2,000 square feet, doesn't exist? They don't even look at the bunker, it doesn't exist. But the person who does hit into that bunker, has that particular length off the tee, cares very much about that. And we got to make sure that if you're going to have a bunker, that you're going to challenge somebody, that you're challenging the right player. So if the A player doesn't even see the hazard, you haven't affected them one way or another. So that's where what we try to do is figure out where are those, within this big bowl of hazards that everyone sees, what are the hazards that are most affecting your higher handicappers, and then to a much lesser degree, what are the hazards that your scratch players really care about. And the key to all of it is to give options back to the golfer. For example, if you look at the first hole in that monstrous cavity quarry of a bunker that exists in front. And I can say that now because most people nod their head. I always say the worst, it's better to say something disparaging about someone's spouse than it is about their golf course, because they know that the spouse has issues, but the golf course. So I have to be very careful about that, but that's true. And you all understand you have a bunker problem that's very deep. But the point is with that, is you have a bunker that is so absolutely massive. Could it be 1/3 that size and still put the same amount of fear into a scratch player that's playing to a pin just over that bunker as it does to the poor person who is actually trying to avoid the bunker, hit in it, and because the bunker is so long, now they have the added penalty of a long bunker shot, which is always a pleasure, when they weren't even trying to challenge the bunker to begin with. And so that's the way that you try to design a golf course to have your cake and eat it too. And you truly can have something that meshes reasonably well for the high handicappers and low handicappers that totally obliterates the exclamation which always comes out, well, you're making it too easy, what's going to happen to the course rating? Because here's what it comes down to. Golf is a fascinating quantitative game. And when someone says the course got easier, you have a record of what the rounds are, right? And so when I look at the pre-renovation scratch players shooting, let's say 72.8, and you come back and after the renovation they're shooting 72.6, and there's no statistical difference, that eliminates any of the hearsay, which sounds good in a stag when you've been very well lubricated, bitch about how easy the golf course is, but really is not part of how the golf course sets up in reality. So a lot of what we do is separate the myth from the reality, even though perception is very important, and that generally creates a more egalitarian type atmosphere. It's beautiful, and all you care about is how nice the golf course looks and how much fun you're having. That's the trick. I got on a rant, sorry.
Yeah, you did.
I saw that the people were still looking, though. I feel sorry. You want to ask another question?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Just a follow-up to Kelly's question there and your rant, I guess.
Thank you.
You talked a lot
It's a
about
euphemism.
the high handicapper, making the course fun for the high handicapper, and making the course challenging for the really low handicapper. But there's a lot of us that are in the middle, and maybe, pretty decent golfers in the teens, but not the highs and not the lows. In my experience, playing a lot of resort-type golf courses in Florida and places, there's a huge difference between the forward and the next. Maybe you could speak to that, because it's either you're a 30 handicapper, you need to play way up there where it's easy, or you're a 5,
Yes.
an under 10, and you need to play back here. Can
Sure.
you speak to that a bit? Because
Yeah.
I find that.
That's a good point. And
Unacceptable.
I explained that earlier this morning, and I can do a little better, I think, even now, is that when we lay a golf course out new, we start at the very back tee, and we measure out to the landing area, and that yardage has changed over time, but now it's about 270 yards. So from the back tee to what we call the turn point, or the landing area, the middle of it is about 270 yards. Then, when we set all the other tees, we go to that preferred landing area and we measure backwards. So the next set of tees would be at 240, the next set of tees might be 210, the next set of tees might be 180, and then a set of tees at 150 or so. So we start going from back to the middle, then we go from the middle and we measure back. Then we go out and evaluate the landing area. And so if the landing area for a good player is, 14 is a good example, is we want everybody to have the expectation of hitting the ball to the top of the hill, so that you're looking in on that green. If you hit it over that hill, then you've not taken the right line, or if you're short of it, you can still look into it. So we evaluate the landing areas as well as the teeing areas. And that's why on 9, as an example, an average person can hit a pretty good drive and not have a clue where the green is. So we want to take out that right side bunker, open that fairway up a little bit, give you a landing area, and then let's make the golf hole harder on the left side where the really good players are hitting the ball. So now what we've done is just made it more equitable for you. And so we try to answer your question, ideally we'd like to get a set of tees at 5,000 yards one at about 5,700 or 5,800. We'd like to get another set around 62, 63, 67, and then anything above 7 as high as you can get it. Aaron, we mentioned Aaron Hills. If you took Aaron Hills and took every tee to the very back, it would be 8,500 yards. And the reason is not because you want an 8,500 yard golf course, is that you want a golf hole that can play 650 yards one day and 570 the next. So that you can move tees around. You're not playing the same golf course all the time. And so you want that drivable par 4 some of the time, and other times you don't. And so that's why we try to mix the tees, and we look at landing areas, and then we look at the shots going in, and how fair is that for the person that's got to play it.
So that's
We
the
take all that.
theoretical. In practice, here's how we do it. We get a big group of people that represent all those different skill levels, and we say, got any tees or lack of tees that really drive you nuts? And that way it's tailored to the, so I'm sure in your mind, if I said pick a golf hole or 2 or 3, that there is a poorly resolved set of tees where you would add a tee, I bet you come up with something right now, right? And all we've got to do is ask. And so that is just like the building of a bunker is your lab practical in the field, how does it work? You start with that. As my father noted, it's based on general data, then you tailor it to these type of discussions, and then you create the plan. That way, as many people are happy as you practically can.
Sometimes we'll go out to the preferred landing area and have people hit shots backwards towards the tees, and then we see how that shot would play in reverse. In other words, if we want, let's say we want the 30 handicapper to be in this landing area, let's say, well, let's get a couple 30 handicappers, let's go out there and tee it up and hit it back towards the tees, and that'll tell us where the tees ought to be, in theory, you know.
But then we don't, the beautiful thing about that is he absolves us for any complaints. So the complaint box for that guy, just say, look, that's what you told us you wanted. See, so that's the real trick in golf architecture. It's risk transfer, again, where you avoid it. This is fundamental risk transfer. That answer the question? Thank you.
Hey, Mike, I have a question, not related to this plan in particular. I'm unsure if many members in this group know that Mike, on a side note, is a wonderful collector of golf history. So he has a wonderful museum in Columbus that Chris and Mike, they're too humble to explain how wonderful it is. It's probably one of the largest private collections of golf memorabilia in North America, if not the world, I would say. So one, if you could let us know one of your favorite pieces of your collection, because I've been there, it's unbelievable. And secondly, you've worked with a lot of your great architect friends, Arnold Palmer and Jack Nicklaus. If you can give us a little story about Mr. Nicklaus or Mr. Palmer, it'd be great.
Well, first, thanks. Again, everybody is welcome. We love to have people come visit us in Columbus. Our office is about 5,000 square feet. It is jam-packed full of golf history. You've got a lot of good historical things on walls and places. Just imagine that and multiply it by a whole bunch. But the things that are probably the most important to me in that collection, I'm being a golf architect, I'm kind of partial to that. Probably 3 things come to mind right off. I can't answer one.
Just
Jason.
one.
I got 3. One is H.S. Cole's.
I tried.
I got H.S. Cole's private notebook that he kept all of his golf architectural related things, like his brochure and some letters, and a lot of his drawings, a lot of things like that. So to have, you know, it probably got to the grandkids, and grandkids said, I'd rather have the money, and so it went to an auctioneer, and I bought it at an auction. The second thing is Alistair McKenzie was the guy who hired the surveyor to survey the old course at St. Andrews to figure out where all the bunkers and the greens and tees and all the waste areas were. I have a signed copy of that. Says to my friend A.W. Tillinghast from A. McKenzie. So that one's pretty high up on the list. And then the very first golf book that was ever published in North America was a golf book that was called Golf in America, written by a gentleman named Lee. And I happened to buy a copy of it long when I first started golf collecting. And I had no idea who C.B. McDonald was because I was kind of new to that history. And I got this book home and I opened it up, and there was C.B. McDonald's book plate and C.B. McDonald's signature on it, we have that. Well, recently I found a copy of a book called Golf in America, written by a gentleman named Lee. Opened it up, and it was A.W. Tillinghast had signed it. So the book, the map, and H.S. Colt's personal professional notebook.
Now, the second part to that, my father was asked, we live in Columbus, Ohio, Cider Country Club, which you may have heard of, hosted a hell of a lot more than the U.S. Senior Open, try the Ryder Cup and a PGA, Nicklaus's home course, and so on. Yes, among other things. So quite a venerable track. My father was asked to do a full-scale renovation, starting with the greens. Jack Nicklaus became involved serendipitously. Initially, at first, thought Jack was going to take over, as Jack does, because, again, Nicklaus versus Hurdzan, Nicklaus wins. But can you tell a story from your really intimate experience? Not many people get that. Normally it's the dog and pony show. But a real Jack Nicklaus, where he grew up on his home course, making it better. You have one story.
Yeah, one story. We wanted to redo the 8th green, which is like their signature green. And Jack and I've known Jack for quite a while. We're on different social levels, but I've known him professionally. And so Jack and I are working together, and we're riding a cart, and we're talking about ideas as we go. And the 8th green we wanted to redo. And so we're riding up there, and Jack said, he said, Mike, what do you want to do here? And I said, Jack, I want to lower this green. I'd like to get it to move from right to left. I said, I'd like it to open up the front. And I said, we need to get rid of that damn moat that goes around the green to the right. So he said, well, why aren't we doing that? And I said, well, because this membership thinks it's an iconic golf hole and they don't want to change it. And he said, watch this. So we go up on the green, and there's, of course, it's Jack Nicklaus, so you've got 20 members there, you know.
All dressed up.
All dressed there, because Jack Nicklaus is there.
So
Jack goes up on the green, and he's looking at it, and he goes, well, what do you guys think of this green? And they go, oh, this is our iconic green. It's the front of our scorecard. And so then Jack goes, Jack said, I don't see that at all. I don't see this at all. This is just a terrible golf green. Well, yeah, it could be better. You know, and they're all backpedaling. Pretty soon the circle gets wider. So they said, well, Jack, what do you think? And he goes, well, I think we ought to lower this green, get it close to the water, have it go from right to left and open up the front. They go, genius. That man is genius. So we walk off the green, and he bumps me, and he said, that's how you do it. Oh, dear. We had a lot of them. Anyway, again, whatever, but yes.
Can you describe the rerouting on 14?
Yes.
Have you done that already? We got here a little late.
Talk
the
about
routing on 14.
Yeah, on this 14.
Yeah, describe it.
Well, what we're trying to do is to change the angle a little bit and move the 14th hole to the left, basically, is what the driving area. The green's going to stay where it is. The pine trees that are over in the right rough are going to stay where they are. There's going to be a pond that's going to be built near those trees. We already talked about that in the reservoir down there. So in order to do that, because you've got a wonderful piece of topography that Doug McKenzie was with us earlier today and said that when his dad first started playing a golf course, that the better players could only hit it to the top of the hill on 14, and basically short of that bunker that was there. Well, now the better players are hitting it clear to the bottom of the hill. Just hit it in that slot and just let it release and get down there. So we want to take the hole back to the sort of the strategy that Mr. Jones had. Well, the way to do that, you got to take the tee back, because they'll be back by the beehives. So the back 2 tees would be back on that hill. We would then make the existing tee become the second or the third and fourth tee, and then we have a 5th tee that we'll keep the forward tee that's there now and add one more. But we want to move the fairway left, cut down 2 trees, and then move the bunker that's on the left, move it to the right. So if you want to get the speed slot, you have to challenge the bunker that's on the right. But anybody else that plays to a fairway that wants to look in on the green, you play it to the right of, or to the left of our new bunker, up on the big flat of that hill, and you're looking right down on the green. And you're taking the view of the parking lot out, and we're getting a lot of good things on it. So basically, it shifts the fairway to the left, take the bunker and move it to the right.
But you know how this started? This is more as a story behind a story is all more. So first impression of golf hole, we're standing on the tee and said, shit, you're looking at the parking lot. And if you're probably not registered, but go out there and look at the parking lot. You won't be able to stop looking at the parking. That's the first impression. You're looking right at the parking lot, number one. Number two, you have these wonderful topographical features called ravines that are all over the golf course. But unfortunately, you get a lot of underbrush that grows up in and around. You can't see it. And we're looking at it and going, not only are you looking at the parking lot over there, you got a ravine, which is really cool feature over here on the left, and it's kind of flat. And then the fairway is all the way over there. Why isn't the fairway more intimate with the ravine, which would make sense? And then if you shift the playing, well, then you don't look at the parking lot. And this whole bunker that's on the left, who hits it over there anyhow? It doesn't challenge, just a big monstrosity of sand on. Why don't you just shift that over? Now that you want to hit down that speed slot, like my father said, you got to flirt with the bunker. But if you want to play it safe, i.e. the options, you can play it out to the left. So that was the genesis of everything, was the parking lot combined with the ravine, combined with the, what's that bunker doing over there? Is that part of this golf hole? Seriously, it's a wonderful thing if you can look at your golf hole the first time. You only get a first chance impression. That's the beautiful thing that we have. But that's how that whole thing started. And if you look at the plan, you go out there, a lot of words, but it will make very good sense, I hope, when you actually stand out there and do it.
That answer?
So if
Yeah.
you hit in that right bunker from up top, then you've got to hit it over pond and trees to get the.
Oh, you can hit it down in the weeds now. The difference is we're taking an area that's totally out of play most of the time because it's wet and sloppy and turning that into a pond. But
if you hit in the right bunker off the tee.
yeah, no, you're going to move the bunker to the right.
Okay, so if you're in that right bunker, now you've got to hit the ball out of there, either around trees or over a ravine to get to the green.
No,
That's kind of penalizing, isn't it?
no, I guess we'd have to take, that's the difference, taking a plan and taking people out like we did today and show them.
The bunker would be about where the center of the fairway is.
Yeah,
Yeah. So it wouldn't be as far right as you're thinking.
yeah. And it separates it from the range a little bit, which that's minor. But the real reason it is a much better golf hole with the fairway moved left. Much better golf hole. And then we're going to take that front left bunker and make it much smaller. The front right bunker stays the way it is. The front left bunker gets smaller, and then you make that opening into that green reasonable. There's a place where the average, if you look how wide, it's almost as wide as this stage, is the entrance into that green. And a lot of people roll the ball. And so we're trying to make a good entrance into there. And on top of that, the entrance is convex. So the ball that does land there is going to go left or right into a bunker. So it's very unfair to a person that hits the ball reasonably well but short. And so we want to open up that front. We want to get a different look. The whole right hole locations will have a lot more value to playing the ball left when you play to a right hole location now, because you're going to be coming in on the long axis of it. So there's lots and lots of reasonable strategic benefits for doing that. And probably as soon as we get it all done, the trees will die, but you know, it'll still be a better. Yeah.
Doug, you said you have one first impression.
Oh, there's
What
Doug.
was your first impression? Of course,
You're asking me?
asking you guys.
Do you have a particular,
Well, you say you have one
Facet?
impression when you look at a hole and it comes out so obvious to you. So when you came out to our course and you looked at it, what was the first impression of the course? Is there a,
Well, your reaction to 2 was pretty interesting.
Yeah, it was a negative reaction. It's a great golf hole, but the fortress of stone, but that's a minor component. The overall, which everybody seems to agree with, there's a little few too many courses of stone at the leading edge of the pond on 2. We're going to take that down just to get it back in scale. That's just a proportion. I think that the most important part about a golf course is the maintenance. It's not the design. People talk about the design, what they really talk about is the maintenance. And this didn't used to be so. Actually, Golf Digest did a top 10 back in, like, let's say 1998. Most important things to a golfer on a golf course. This was uncanny. Number 2 was design, and number 8 was maintenance. Then they did a survey 10 years later, and number 2 became the maintenance, and number 8 was the design. So it totally flip-flopped. I don't know if I said that right, but it doesn't matter. You get the idea. So the point is that you can't ever excise from your mind quality maintenance or unquality maintenance, no different than good offside views or not good offside views. So our first impression was, damn, this place is really well maintained, seemingly everywhere. Like you could pick, like you pick the carpet up and there's nobody swept anything under the rug on this carpet. This is amazing. And so from a front door, and I would tell you, this is why I'm saying Jason's praises, that guy will take you infinitely farther than any golf course architect ever will in terms of status and brand. And that was, for me, without talking about anything on the golf course, that absolutely was at least my first impression. You have arrived at a special place. I didn't know a damn thing about City of London, which I do now. Didn't really know anything about the history of the golf course per se. I was a fresh newcomer to a strange land and saying, this is pretty cool, whatever this is. What was your overall first?
The learning practice facilities that you have are some of the best I've seen anywhere at all. And you've got a tremendous range. You've got a great tee area. We've been here in every kind of season, in the weather you can think of. And there's always somebody out there. Usually it's Doug hitting balls, but there's always somebody out there usually hitting balls. And then you go to your short game center over there, and I saw that. I was like, wow, talk about the potential. But that's what far better than any club that I can think of as far as the potential for the learning center and the practice areas to develop really good players. You've got tremendous facility. That's probably the short game center is maybe a little underused, but it shouldn't be. You just got a phenomenal asset over there, along with the driving range. That was my first impression. Wow, because on almost every single renovation, we've done hundreds of these. Every single renovation we do, we're always trying to make the learning center, the range, bigger. We're always trying to come up with a short game center, putting greens, chipping greens, driving range. You got it. I mean, you guys are way ahead of the game. It's phenomenal.
John?
Yeah, you play a lot of courses and you go from hole to hole and they don't really fit. Like you've got 6 holes, that don't fit the next 6. You've got short par 4s and long par 4s and they don't really flow. We keep stats in a men's league through that Genius program. And so each hole during men's league is played about 2,500 times during the year. So we have a stat in each hole and you can go into the stats and tell which holes play the most over par or closer to par. And so you got a variation of hole by hole by hole. And interestingly, I got really bored one day and the average score in men's league is 90. That's the average. So the course plays 18 holes, 18 over par on average. And I'm just wondering if you've had an opportunity to look at those stats to see if we got the proper mix of short par 4s, long par 4s, short par 5s, long par 5s. I guess you probably answered the question because it's more where the tees go, but I think there's a lot of data there that could be used.
Yes.
And I'm not talking about changing the design or anything, but just does the course flow according to the way a modern course should flow?
I'd definitely be interested. We love data. Obviously, we're scientists by background and training. And so, yes, we'd be very
I'm an
interested.
accountant, so that's why I asked.
And ideally, what you'd like to do is to be able to set the golf course up so that on every day you've got 6 difficult holes, 6 easy holes, and 6 intermediate holes, but they're never the same 6. So that, you know, and you can do that by changing tee location and hole location and coordinating those. And so we say that if you want to try to do this 6 hard, easy, and medium, is that first you need to decide, we'll have good mapping of the greens, is you work from the hole location backwards. Of any great strategic golf course, you have to play it from the hole backwards. You have to decide, do I want to play it to the left, to the middle, or to the right, to give me the best angle to come in. That's real strategy. And so in order to arrive at 6 hard, easy, you can actually chart that. And that's something that can be given to Jason and working with Jason, so that when you set up a long, difficult hole, a par 3 on one place, you're going to give it back to him someplace else. And so that makes the golf course fresh and it plays different all the time. You don't automatically glove the same club out of your bag every time. And let me give you an example. We mentioned Erin Hills earlier. When Patrick Cantlay was #1 amateur in the world during the 2011 U.S. Amateur. They played at Erin Hills, and I was walking with him. And he was playing Kelly Craft. He had Kelly Craft down 1 after 14 holes in the finals. And the 15th hole was meant to be a drivable par 4, but we kept building back tees and they got longer. So for every day previous to that, that hole played 420 yards. The day that Patrick Cantlay was playing Craft, the USGA had moved the tee up. They went to the tee they'd been playing, and the marshal said, no, you're playing from down there. They went down to the tee, was playing 305 yards. They didn't know what to do. So do you go for the green, because those guys could hit it 300 yards? Do you lay back in front of the cross bunkers, or do you try to play it over the cross bunkers because it's an elevated green? So Patrick Cantlay decided to hit a 7-iron off the tee and lay up short. He misjudged and hit it into the bunker. The second shot, he hit it over the green. Third shot coming back, made bogey, went square at 15. He was so shook up by that on the 16th hole, he went 1 down and lost the U.S. Amateur over that. And that's only because he was on his game, he knew, but you broke the rhythm. You broke the rhythm, and he couldn't recover. And you got to get a good player, you got to get it to him in the head, because you can't beat the mechanics. And so that's why we talk about angles and hard hole locations and easy and all of that. But that's the way to do it, is to take that information and be able to chart that so you come up 6 hard, 6 easy, and 6 intermediate holes, but never the same 6. It sounds complicated, but it's not really.
And to answer your question, no, we didn't see any flaws in the foundation here. You'll know it when you play a course that's repetitive.
Yeah.
And certainly within the fact that you can't take, even if there was a par 3 and convert it to a par 5, within the realm of reality, plus the differences in setup, you're well within what he's driving at.
Yeah, you got to get really challenging hole locations to really make the golf course play that way. And I gave an example of where a 54-hole tournament, where only a couple guys under par after. It's a country club of Darien in Connecticut. It's a member course. Best players in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts. There's only a couple guys under par after 54 holes, because they knew how to set the golf course up. Well, you've been very patient, very kind. I hope you continue to be patient and kind.
Yes.
I just wanted to thank Mike and Chris for coming up. They drove up today, and it was a long, exhausting day, I think, with a few sessions and then walking the course. So we really, really appreciate you guys coming up.
So you're welcome.
Everybody's got their questions answered, and if you have more questions, feel free to let us know,
Absolutely.
and we can pass them on.
either to John or to Doug or directly to us or through Jason. If you're in Columbus, a few people have come visited us. They walk in the place and they go, most of the time people get out of their cars and they start taking pictures. They've taken pictures of our signs in the parking lot. So by the time they walk in the door, they already got a big smile on their face. And they said, I parked in Tiger Woods parking spot. I said, Tiger's not coming in today, don't worry about it. You know, and from then on, it's just a real fun day. So if you're anywhere near Columbus, you really should come visit. It's pretty extraordinary. Well, with that, yep.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.